Very well, Sam Gituku from out buildings. Let me now introduce you to the Speaker of the National Assembly. We are saying this is President Uhuru Kenyatta's last budget, the 10th budget actually, but the man who has been presiding over the House proceedings for those 10 times that the budget has been read in this House is Speaker Justin Muturi, and I'm with him here. He's serving his second term as the Speaker of the National Assembly. Speaker, karibu, and looking at the scenarios, by there was a question as to whether this budget will be read today or not, because there are some issues that were being raised. Some of the issues that I've had Honorable Aden Duale, the member for Garissa Town, asking there, some of those will try and get answers from the Speaker of the National Assembly, Justin Muturi. Speaker, there was a concern initially until you resolved that matter as to whether the budget would be read today, the highlights would be read today or not. April, June, why the disparity?
Thank you very much. It's good for me to set the record straight in that the Constitution merely requires the Cabinet Secretary responsible for finance not later than 2 months to the end of each financial year to table before the National Assembly estimates from the national government, from the judiciary, and from the Parliamentary Service Commission. Together with that will be revenue-raising measures and the debt management strategy for the medium term. That is what the Constitution says in Article 221. So the Cabinet Secretary is merely required to submit those documents as a House of Parliament. And given the fact that since independence, Kenyans have been used to seeing and hearing a Minister for Finance reading the budget from the floor of the House, we as a House of Parliament resolved immediately when we came in 2013 that it would be unfair to break with that tradition. Moreover, there is an agreement within the East African community that budgets, and in our case, highlights, are done on the same day. Mm-hmm. But we thought that we need to provide that in our standing orders. Otherwise, the Cabinet Secretary can merely bring submit those documents as well as the revenue-raising measures, which essentially is the finance bill, because it is the finance bill that has proposals and suggestions as to how a Cabinet Secretary intends to raise revenue for the next financial year.
One of the main concerns all over is the cost of living, cost of doing business. And Parliament that you preside over has a role in the taxation procedures for the country and so on and so forth. So what is this particular thing that members of Parliament can do between now and maybe August or thereabout before their term ends to cushion Kenyans against that rising cost of living?
Again, I think it's good for me again to tell Kenyans that members of Parliament, first of all, under Article 95, Clause 4, Paragraph B, are the ones who do the appropriations. Even though we are the Cabinet Secretary saying, I'm allocating, I'm giving, that is not his work. The Constitution does not give him that responsibility. That is the responsibility of the House. And therefore, even when it comes to taxation measures, when the bill is, because they are going to be tabled this afternoon, when the finance bill is tabled, which contains those many taxation proposals, it is up to the members to look through them and see where it is that which taxes they can lower, which they can introduce, because all that they're required to do is to take the views of the Cabinet Secretary. It is not, they are not bound, the House is not bound by the views and the proposals that come from the Cabinet Secretary. And therefore, Kenyans should know that if they are concerned about high levels of taxation, the blame should lie on the members of Parliament. Not because they have no business. They have no business to accept everything that is brought to them. And when these documents are brought here, like now they are coming in good time, early, before 30th, because it is 30th of April that they are supposed to. That is the latest date that the Cabinet Secretary is supposed to bring. After that, the members, those documents are taken to the various departmental committees, which committees engage with the members of public, all the departments, all the ministries, the Parliamentary Service Commission, the judiciary, and every other, and indeed the members of public. It is after those extensive consultations that the committees all present their recommendations to the Budget and Appropriations Committee, which in turn analyzes that, gets the views of the Cabinet Secretary from National Treasury, and after that brings its own recommendations. It is those recommendations of the committee which, if adopted, form the basis for the preparation of the annual appropriations bill. Remember, appropriation now is one that deals with how money is going to be spent here and there. The finance bill, of course, it has been ruled by the courts. Again, we cannot pass the finance bill before we are going through the appropriations, so that we know how much it is that we have allocated, so that then when we go to tax, we know how much it is that we need to tax to finance what we have appropriated.
Last question, Mr. Speaker. The debt question is still very, very pertinent, and it is members of Parliament who also have a role in dealing with it. So how do they deal with it between now and August when their term ends?
Parliament, I speaking from the position of the chairman of the Parliamentary Service Commission, we as a commission, we have enabled parliamentarians, because that's our function under Article 127, to provide with them facilities to make them efficient and effective. So we have highly trained manpower here, which help the committees and all members at liberty. In fact, I must thank the member for Garissa, because he seems to be the only one who is making use of these very highly trained personnel that we have here. So members of Parliament, the challenge is again on them. Please go seek the opinion, seek expert advice from our Parliamentary Budget Office. We have experts there.
Right.
But the speaker has no vote.
Quorum question.
Quorum is in the Constitution. We are in the process of nominations, party primaries. So obviously, at this time, it is expected that we will have a lot of disruptions on the basis of quorum, because members, their minds are not now very, very stable. But after, I think, next week or so, we expect that those who have been defeated, even those who have won, will all be back here. Some sulking, others celebrating.
Thank you.
Just to give us quorum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And by the way, could also be your last budget to preside over?
Absolutely, absolutely. I have no intentions of being Speaker beyond this term. Yes.
Right. You have already declared president, your bid for the presidency anyway. Yes. All right. Very well. Thank you very much. And that's Speaker of the National Assembly. The bell has rung, so members of Parliament are making their way to the House, and it is the Speaker who will be presiding over that session, where the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary will be making his way here at Parliament buildings. So let me hand it over back to you, Wahiga, in studio.
Great insights there, Francis Gashuri, live from the offices of the Speaker of the National Assembly, Justin Muturi. And he began by asking the Speaker to respond to a comment made there by former Majority Leader Eden Duale, who stated that what CS Ukur Yatani is doing today, tabling that budget in Parliament, is unconstitutional and illegal because the laid out process in the law has not been followed. And the Speaker first began by defending why he allowed this to happen. Of course, as the Speaker, he's the one who gave the go-ahead, stating that the budget process is within the law and there is still room for whatever else needs to be done in line with the law. But he also told Kenyans that if you have any challenges with how the budget-making process has been over the last couple of years, you need to blame your legislators. They have a key role to play in how the budget-making process is carried out. Again, let me get quick reactions. I'm sure the Treasury CS could be moving anytime soon from his offices. So let's quickly hear from each of my guests. Wanjiro, let's start with you. Some brief comments, please.
Quickly, in terms of the legality, let's remember that the budget process has been honed by cases in court. So in the event this is an illegality or an unconstitutionality, you can expect to hear from the courts. The Division of Revenue bill enshrinement, the finance bill enshrinement came through a court case where the Parliament had refused.
I beg your pardon. I need to interrupt you because we want to take our viewers straight to Treasury building. I can see the Governor of Central Bank there. I can see KRA represented, and of course the leadership of National Treasury and Planning led by CS Ukur Yatani. We mentioned that this would happen any time now, and they will then make their way out of the building onto the street there, Harambee Avenue, and we apologize for our signal quality. It's a live event, and so that is to be expected. And members of the press there trying their best to get the best shots of this walk, possibly the last walk by this man in this regime from that office with the position he currently holds as its cabinet secretary. And we know that once they've taken the photos outside this building, that they will then make their way to Parliament for the process that we have all been obviously waiting for. And of course, on the Parliament side, we know the bell has been rung. Members of Parliament have been called to attention by the leadership of Parliament there. And so it's all systems go for the tabling of this budget at this time. Once again, we apologize for our signal quality at the moment. Wanjiru, maybe I can allow you to finish as we continue. Go ahead.
Right. So the point I was making, and thanks for that, is that the courts have already helped in shaping the budget process in ensuring compliance, where the Speaker or the administration have not complied. So the courts play a role in interpretation, and this may yet be another area. Is this a ceremonial process that can happen at any time, or has it breached the required laid down expected process? The key thing is the role of Parliament that's coming out, because we have a budget-making Parliament, and we've seen the budget then balloon. We've seen our taxes go out of hand under the watch of a budget-making Parliament. And indeed, Parliament has behaved more like the party headquarters of the ruling administration than as the people's watchdog, because where they needed to shoot down provisions that are inimical to the well-being of Kenyans, where they needed to push back against VAT increases, excise increases, they have not done so. The third factor, apart from the failure of Parliament, I think the administration has also failed because, and you know, part of that is on Parliament. We don't have a finance policy, so decisions around taxation are being made on the go as issues happen. And I was listening to some deliberations where there was a bit of cat and mouse. Is this the failure of the administration, failure of Parliament? Parliament would have been the ones to generate that policy. Last point, though, is on debt management. Our debt process is very broken, and there's a lacuna in the law. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if Parliament had approval authority of the debt facilities, we'd be in a different situation, to be honest, because of the way they've conducted themselves at really very amenable to the executive. But the way our debt process is structured, all the powers are vested in the Treasury. And the Treasury has then been used to make decisions without proper oversight. And decisions are made, contracts are signed, they are hidden and sealed away. And all these issues are then brought to Parliament as a fait accompli. So like I said, yes, we have a weakness with Parliament because they are very complicit, they are very malleable, they are so interested in their own, you know, they'll usually negotiate with the executive for their CDF. If you give us CDF, then we'll pass the appropriations for you. So there's too much interest. At the end of the day, we have a broken system, but the biggest challenge is our culture. This political culture has to be dealt with. And I think that's one of the issues we all have to contend with as Kenyans.
It's very interesting, as you mentioned, Parliament. Our camera crew cut to pictures from Parliament, almost as if you knew that. And so the question of the responsibility of Parliament when an analysis, a complete analysis of the last 10 years or 9.5 years or so of the Jubilee regime is done, what role did Parliament play? Well, that's one we will continue debating here. Remember, we are live in 2 locations. We are live for you at Parliament buildings there, and members are coming in right now. The bell has been rung. They should actually be seated any minute now, ready to listen to the Treasury CS. And we will also get you some pictures from Treasury where we know the CS, the leadership of National Treasury. I saw the Central Bank Governor, Dr. Njoroge, I think the KRA DG as well, and the KRA team, they're all there, and we expect they'll take a few photos any minute now and then navigate their way here. Dr. Kitui, briefly, your responses there. You heard Duale, you heard the Speaker, and you're watching this. Let me get your thoughts.
So just to start from where Wanjiru ended, I think it's on the responsibility of the oversight of Parliament. And I think Raphael already alluded to that. I think it was really probably the Speaker read his mind. But the problem we have is, yes, it's true, the Parliament is not providing the oversight over the executive as it should. And we can dig deeper into the reasons behind that. But I think that's a fundamental problem we have in this country. We have a very beautiful constitution that anticipates the three arms of government working very well with each other, checking each other's powers. But in a country where the executive can revisit the judiciary and capture Parliament, could this be the right time to actually say our democracy is on trial? Or is our democracy failing by virtue that the arms of government are not able to check each other as constitutionally anticipated, but they are able to check each other the way the executive checks the judiciary through budget, or the way the executive captures Parliament, that actually Parliament is no longer effective in carrying out its mandate. Is the lack of official opposition in Parliament one of those factors that has probably undermined the effectiveness of the Parliament oversight over the executive? And I think it's worrying because we are degenerating into a kleptocracy in the strictest sense of the word. We are very effective for political scientists, and I'm not one.
Okay. Hold the thought on where we are, just to quickly allow our viewers to take in that picture. He's actually just finished. No, he's been told to go back and told CSC attorney, let's get one more photo. A 3.3 trillion budget, according to the 2022 budget policy statement. Allocation to national government, 2.075 trillion. Appropriations of 2.02 trillion to the executive. Parliament, judiciary will share about 38.5 billion and 18.9 billion. That's what we saw in that budget policy statement. Ministry of Education said to receive the lion's share of this budget, 525.9 billion, with the Energy Ministry at 368.3 billion and National Security at 203.1 billion. A bit of a challenge for our camera crew. They're just trying to get those pictures, once again being a live event. But those are some of the numbers that are contained within that briefcase that the Treasury CS will now go and table at Parliament. Dr. Kitui, I can give you a minute just to wrap up your thoughts on this.
Yes, so I'm saying that as our democracy is degenerating, are we ending up as a kleptocracy? And this is where a few individuals come to power basically to just enrich themselves. And that's, I think, for me, where we're ending up, because the three arms of government are not able to check themselves. And I think that is the fundamental problem, to be sincere. Because if we approach this budget process as a technical process, as a technical problem, we are really missing the point. Because it's really a political, ethical, it's a constitutional problem. It goes down to the fundamentals of how the government works, the way it was designed to work, and how it fails or is not meant to fail. And so I think for me, where the solution really lies is we really, as Kenyans, we have to find our way back to making sure there is accountable governance from the budget process, domestic resource, the resource mobilization, whether it's domestic or foreign or debt, to public finance management, to the transparency around that public finance management, to the oversight and accountability where people who are engaging in corruption or theft, for that matter, because sometimes it's just blatant theft and we label it as corruption to sanitize it a bit, that there's accountability. Unless we have accountable governance across that chain of what government does, I think we can approach budget-making process as a technical process, and I think we'll never really reach where Mokua felt that in 15 years we'll be at a better place. Unless really we address that fundamental failure of the government, I think we're in for a very rude shock in the next 15 years, Mokua.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
You can respond immediately. He's already thrown it your way.
Thank you.
As we wait for that convoy of the Treasury CS to start.
Thank you so much.
Driven to Parliament.
Thank you so much, Daktari, for taking over from Wahiga. Allow me not to delve into what my colleagues have already said around the process, the legality of the process which is before us. But let me say something on the responsibility of Parliament and exerting the authority. And I'll say this by giving you an example. Some few years back, and with due respect to my friend who was a banker, when Parliament exerted their authority and introduced the interest rate capping. Because there was a lot of cry among Kenyans that the interest rates were not tenable, and there was a need to relook at it. Parliament stood firm and introduced a rate cap. Of course, as a CISPAC, we had a position. We supported, actually, the rate cap. And we have still not changed our position. I think the advisory is still there. But look at the sanity with which the lenders have conducted themselves for the last 2 or so years, when the rate cap was, those amendments, when the rate cap was repealed. Because they know that if they make any similar mistake, Parliament is watching. And I must applaud the good work that has been done by the Central Bank. I know they have already applied for review of the pricing, the interest rate. And, but I want to believe that with what Parliament there and offering oversight, they are not going to go back to the way that they were conducting themselves. And I want to say this and connect it with the current debt situation in which we are in, that if Parliament exerted its authority, for example, why did the recommendations of the Budget Committee was cap it at 400 and don't? Why did they have to change again? It's shocking to everyone, but nevertheless, as I said, because of other factors, that's where we are at the moment. But it's a challenge to those who are aspiring to be members of Parliament in the next elections, which are on 8th of August. And our request is, do not donate your authority and responsibility. And I've given you an example, and there has been sanity in the lending market. And Kenyans are enjoying, even though the interest rates are not what we would have expected, but I think it is something, there is stability in this market. And therefore, the oversight role of Parliament is very important in this country. And I don't think they have done very well. And whether they have been captured by the executive is everyone's guess. But you can see what is happening, especially on the issue of the recommendation of 400 billion, and then all of a sudden they have accepted the whole of this. That's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. And before Raphael jumps in, also gives his take, let's continue to point you towards those pictures on our screen. It's rather, I wouldn't use the word slow-moving convoy, but there is a ceremony here, and obviously it allows for members of the press to get the best pictures and the best angles. It's a very short drive, ideally about 8 minutes or so if you were to look at Google Maps to estimate the distance between Treasury Building and Parliament. And the man in that vehicle, one question that economists have been talking about quite a bit this week is whether he has put together a budget that looks at fiscal consolidation. Of course, he hasn't put the budget together alone. It's been part of a wider team that is involved in the budget-making process, including ordinary Kenyans, as per public participation captured in our Constitution. But does the word fiscal consolidation ring in your mind when you think about a budget like this, when you look at some of the priorities? And Raphael, maybe you can jump in immediately with that.
All right. Thanks for you guys. So I have a couple of reactions to his comment, but I'll go to the fiscal consolidation question. In the projections, they are consolidating to about 6%. Deficit to GDP. So if you look at where we are right now, anywhere north of 8.2% or thereabout, the planned 2022-2023 budget framework envisions a deficit of about 6%. So you'd argue that they're consolidating. I think in the earlier stage of the conversation, when you're just crossing over, you had an interesting conversation about what's that in Swahili. And I was whispering to your Swahili colleague that I think that meant funga mishipi.
Oh, funga mishipi.
Yeah, that's that. I'm very poor in Swahili, but that's all I could point to. So
okay, just hold on 1 minute. I don't our viewers to be distracted. I think the pace has picked up now of this convoy. I beg your pardon, Raphael. You are making a very important point that I don't want to get lost with the pictures on our screen. For some reason, the momentum of the convoy has now changed. There's a sense of urgency to get the CS to Parliament buildings there, where he will table that budget for the last time under this regime, who knows what next year will look like, and that's why I give that very specifically, navigating this roundabout now onto Parliament Road and into Parliament buildings. That was rather dramatic. And that's why, Raphael, I felt let's allow our viewers just to take this in before I come back to you. But obviously the convoy will now slow down as it navigates that last little distance now on Parliament Road and get into Parliament buildings, where some of the staff members of Parliament, leadership of Parliament, both houses, etc., are expected to be on standby to welcome the CS, who will then be escorted to the chambers there and then finally to the floor to read his budget, to table it rather, because we already have a sense. And there we can definitely see Gladys Wanga. She chairs the Finance Committee, I believe. I think we would have also expected to see someone like Kanini Kega chairs the Budget Committee, and others who've been highly involved, greatly involved in the budget-making process, and will continue to do so, because remember, there's some things that have not been done by virtue of the fact that the budget is being read earlier than it would traditionally. But really, some very interesting pictures there on our screen. I think also members of the press have been forced to jog quite a bit as they take photos, and together with security personnel and the security teams of the CS and the other National Treasury leadership and the governor of Central Bank, if he'll also make his way here, and others as well. But the CS is now in Parliament, or at least within the compound, and will shortly be escorted to the floor of the House to read that budget. Raphael, I think now we can allow you to say something. Please proceed.
All right. Yeah. So I was making the point that by plan, yes, they're pursuing fiscal consolidation. And it's a multi-year program, at least by intention. I know there will be legitimate quibbles about whether the actual outcome of it is consolidative. So it's multi-year, and it's both sides of the budget process. So it's both revenue initiatives and expenditure side as well, so prioritizing some expenditure. On the revenue side, it's heavily reliant on that expectedly, because the shrinkage of the deficit from the over $1 trillion to the current 840, whatever number you want to go with, that's proposed in this budget, is probably 17% reliance on revenue shoot up, which then brings the ride and the risk to the whole balancing act of whether that revenue ambition is actually achievable given the current tax base or resource constraints that we have, and points me to my earlier point, takes me to my earlier point that everything is heavily predicated on performance of the economy broadly. Gladly, there was a rebound. We expect a similar, very positive performance, notwithstanding the pain that we are seeing. But back to, I need to react to this. So economic regulation is very interesting, and the way it's playing out, at least topically now, is with the subsidy framework, because that's a price control. The reason why, and one politician was asking why we don't have that problems in Uganda, the reason we do is because the subsidy actually supports a price control framework. You've seen the distortions there too, if that is not illustrative enough, which takes me to the interest rate cap question.
And I want you to hold so that just allow our viewers to understand what's happening here now. Treasury CS, the IC, Gladys Wanga Finance Committee, PS Treasury, Julius Muya there, the clerk of the National Assembly, should be Michael Sialai, amongst others, being a part of this photo. We know the CS was welcomed by Gladys Wanga and the clerk of the National Assembly. But what we're seeing here is, in a sense, a need to hasten the program so that at 3 o'clock in the next 12 minutes, all would then begin. And the governor of Central Bank also joining in. Quite a big photo, this one, and maybe one to remember, bearing in mind different faces. Yes, there's Kanini Kega. I also mentioned I expected to see him. Bearing in mind next year, not a time like this, but June, you will probably be seeing several different faces there with the change of government and different people there possibly occupying different positions depending on how things go moving forward. So this could be one of those that you take from memory, and thereafter a discussion on the impact of this team, because Many of them have played a crucial role in how the finances of the country are organized, from an oversight perspective in Parliament, from a planning perspective as a National Assembly, and even the Central Bank. You have to have that in the discussion as well, and that's what's happening at this time. So I think this will be over very quickly, and thereafter this procession will have run its course, and business in the House can then begin. A few more photos there, and then we will take you to the next step. Okay. We're also hearing reports that the final budget estimates have been tabled in Parliament by the Speaker, Justin Muturi. The final budget estimates, and we've been waiting for these, and they've just been tabled in Parliament. And so, ordinarily we would have gotten them at this time before the budget is tabled in 2 months and had the chance to analyze them. Parliament would discuss them both at committee level and so forth. And I think Aden Duale was at pains to explain how the process has changed this time around and why he feels it's illegal and unconstitutional. But Justin Muturi defended his decision, stating that no law has been broken in having the CS come and table that budget today, and thus the tabling of those estimates at this moment peculiar. But of course it's a peculiar year with an election just around the corner as well, and so a bit of this was to be expected. And now individual photos happening. Raphael, I think I've been unfair to you, cutting you off twice. Let me allow you to finish up.
Not at all.
So that your point isn't missed.
Yeah, thank you, Aiga. So I was making the point that economic regulation, going the price control route, be it on interest rates or fuel or whatever, is a bad idea. And if we needed any...
A bad idea altogether?
In principle.
Okay.
And I'm saying that you can see it playing out in the fuel subsidy scenario right now, where that's a reflective of it. Inevitably, it leads to distortions of the type that we are seeing right now. But that's not even the major point. I think the more important point that I wanted to make with regard to the whole process is, and I made this in my intro, is budgeting is a question of our values. And you've seen the way quickly this debate has ended up being a constitutional argument. And I like the fact, the more charitable view towards Aden Duale would be like he's making an important constitutional point, which I appreciate, because then it raises a point further about what can he do about it as a legislator. And just point to the point, the issue that I was raising about ineffectiveness of different arms of government with regard to our public finance management. And not to say that I think there was almost a hint to the problem. It's about the political culture of the day, because it's not a design question. If you look at Constitution of Kenya 2010, I think the design is fantastic. So is the PFM Act. So how the values morph into the actual interpretation and utilization of those key value setup arrangements is the problem. That's what's like. And our political culture is actually you and I. The legislators only are reflective of what we all play out in the political terrain. And so we are making decisions right now into August. I expect that at a minimum, at least those who are listening, will pay attention to how all these things are related in a way that then helps us make proper decisions for public governance.
Let me see, and thank you, Raphael, for that. I think you've raised some pertinent points. Let me see if I can get a quick reaction from my panelists, because I know shortly we'll be yielding the floor, so to speak, to Parliament as the formalities then begin. And Mokwa, maybe you can start with us on this one. Kindly ask your panelists, this is from a viewer, to speak to the most prudent and financially feasible ways of plugging the 850 billion budget deficit. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's a very good question coming from the viewer on how can we plug in and perhaps address the 850 billion deficit. And I say this.
Okay, I apologize. I'm told we have a challenge with your sound. Let's get that sorted. I don't know if we can cross over to this, and any of you want to take a chance on that? Most prudent and financially feasible way of plugging in